from agriculture to industry. There is no radical shift. This trend indicates that more skills are needed to be acquired for labor in agriculture to get a job in the manufacturing sector. The fact is this is something that often cannot be solved immediately. We are talking about the capacity and quality of our education and training, particularly the vocational ones. Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the government during the working cabinet has sought to promote social economic development through improving access to health and education service and economic opportunity supported by infrastructure development. For infrastructure development, the focus is not only to improve access to basic infrastructure, but also to improve connectivity across the archipelago. The government also encouraged the development of industrial parks and small and medium industry centers outside Java Island. As of today, 5 industrial area or special economic zone have been operated, which are Semangke, Morowali, Bantaeng, Palu, and the Konawe. The other 6 industrial areas are targeted to operate in by 2020, including the piloting of industrial park in Bintuni Bay, supported through public-private partnership. The government also improved the development of human resources in the manufacturing sector through improving the capacity and quality of manufacturing school, increasing the number of labor who obtain national standard work competency, conducting 3-in-1 training that includes training certification of competency job placement, as well as link and match between school and business. For the link and match actively, more than 3,100 cooperation agreements have been implemented in a link and match activity between 1,700 SMK and 600 industry in Java and Sumatra since 2017. This collaboration is expected to improve the school's curricula to match with the industry, improve teacher competency, and increase the familiarity of students with their future jobs through apprenticeship and mentorship from the industry. Manufacturing development is also directed to adapt to rapid technological development. For example, Industry 4.0 provides an opportunity to revitalize Indonesia manufacturing sector. The launching of Making Indonesia 4.0 roadmap is expected to provide positive momentum for boosting the productivity and competitiveness of the manufacturing sector, particularly in the 5 priority subsectors, which are food and beverage. The second is textile and apparel. The third one is automotive. The fourth one is chemical, and the last is electrical and electronic. The government has also issued 16 packages to improve the ease of doing business in Indonesia and boost socio-economic competitiveness. The plan to launch online single submission or OSS, for example, is underway with the mission to reduce the barrier in obtaining business license. This system is also expected to increase our response to the dynamic change in the market and economic as a whole. The result of different programs can be observed also from our upward progress in international indicators such as the Global Competitiveness Index and ease of doing business and Investment grade can also be maintained. Nevertheless, many challenges persist to include rule of law, business certainty, quality of human resources, as well as technological and innovation capability. This affects our economic prospect to grow higher. The 3 challenges may also become the reasoning that despite improvement in our ranking in doing business index, the real investment of the manufacturing sector has not increased. The development of manufacturing activity outside Java is also still limited, particularly in terms of product diversification and scale. This also raises some issues related to our ability to expand our participation and share in the global production network and market. Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, our recent effort to find new opportunities for growing higher through a growth diagnostic approach that has shown alarming signs. It showed that our potential growth is only 4 to 5%. This is far below our expectation to grow around 6% in order to pave the way to higher income country. The potential growth can be shifted upward provided that the government devise the right policy for sectors that have the highest potential to create added value. Focusing on improving the growth, particularly and competitiveness, productivity and competitiveness of the manufacturing sector can become a strategic choice. For the last 6 years, the GDP growth of non-oil gas manufacturing has shown up a slowing trend. In the last 2 years, the growth has been even below the national GDP growth. Nevertheless, a positive momentum was observed in the first quarter of 2018 as the GDP growth of the non-oil and gas manufacturing reached 5.03% or almost similar with the national economic growth of 5.06%. This has led to the increase in GDP share of non-oil and gas manufacturing to 17.95% in the same period. For our endeavor to increase manufacturing performance in Indonesia, many models can be used as a reference, whether experiences from Germany, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, China, or from our Asian neighbors. Now, if we want to adopt the good practices based on the other countries' experience, the starting point is different. The mega global trend has also increased the complexity in the way we plan, implement, and manage our policies. Fortunately, some principles seem to be universal as a prerequisite for economic advancement, including in manufacturing sector. Productivity and quality of human resources are among those principles. The country that I mentioned start to prepare their human resources early than the pace when they design the manufacturing development plan. They also continuously improve how the education and training system can keep up with the demand from industry and the advancement of technology, and we are still lagging behind in this respect. What we have understood is that we need to shift the educational curricula with more emphasis on science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, and align them with the future industry. You do have devised some program to align the educational and training system with the industry, but the capacity to prepare skill for future job and type of industry is still far from adequate. We still miss the upstream and basic skills. The missing in the basic life skill has prompted many large companies to raise the issue of employability among our school and university graduates. Reading, writing, arithmetic, time management, basic communication, and problem solving are among basic skills that are often missing, while the work demand is increasing. The issue of human resource becomes more complex when we talk about micro, small, and medium enterprise. Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the current condition of our manufacturing sector indicates that our vision to implement Industry 4.0 required radical steps in how we can improve our educational and training system, as well as prepare our workforce skills to match with that the industry's need. We also need to nurture future industrial players that have global vision, capability, and competitiveness. The book entitled Employment and Re-industrialization in Post-Soeharto Indonesia, launched today, is expected to provide insight and recommendation on how the industry can respond to the dynamic change in economic structure and how the government can devise the right policy and human resources improvement to shift manufacturing sector performance. I think this book can contribute to various critical thinking for Indonesia industrial development, repertoire for the improvement of policy in the future. I congratulate Mr. Tadjoeddin and Mr. Chowdhury for launching this book. Finally, I wish you all have a good seminar, and thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Leo, for that you have delivered today. To mark the launching of the book, the authors will hand over the books to Pak Leo and as well as to the discussion. So, may I ask Pak Leo to come back to the stage, and also Bu Armida, Mr. Esam, and Mr. Kazu to also come to the stage. And Pak Zulfan and Pak Anis, please. So with that, the book is officially launched. But we also from SMERU has some token of appreciation to all of you. So we would like to call you again to come to the stage. But because the stage is rather small, maybe we can go up one by one. The first one is to Pak Leo again. Can I ask our chairman of board of trustee of SMERU, Pak Saihu, to deliver the gift to Pak Leo? Now to the author, Pak Zulfan. The next one to Pak Anis. Terus Pak. Bu Armida, silahkan. Ya. Terima kasih Bu Armida. The next one to Pak Esam, please. And the last one to Pak Kazu. Terima kasih Pak. So the next one, we would like to give the opportunity to the authors to give a presentation about the book. I will leave up to you how to divide the book. Please, Pak Zulfan and Pak Andi.
Okay. Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning for everyone. First of all, thank you very much for SMERU for organizing this launching. And also thank you very much for distinguished panel, Ibu Armida, Kazu, and Esam. Thank you. I'll do presentations in two parts. For around 10 minutes, I'll talk about the book overview of the 7 chapters, and then that will be continued by my co-author about the key policy message. A little bit of background about the book. The book is basically not planned as a book, but between 2011 and 2016, we conducted a series of studies for the ILO. We got multiple requests from Geneva and from Jakarta to do a series of studies. And then back in 2015, 2016, and we look at the material, and then we have more than enough material to consolidate. We adjust different things, and then we think of the policy relevance. So, and then my first visit to Indonesia to do the first study back in 2007. One is introductions, and in the introductions you will find the extended executive summary of the book. So if you don't have enough time, you read the first chapter and then you will get whole idea of the book. Then we have with the overall overview of employment. The key argument here is we need to move from quantity to quality. That's all the argument that we have there. Then we have the general overview about earnings, productivity, and inequality. So we bring three things together, but at the general level. So, of course, productivity is related to the employment situations, and then earnings also, but we bring inequality into the picture as the one of the most pressing issue in Indonesian development for the past 10-15 years. And then in the chapter 4, we be a bit more sharp to look at into the manufacturing sector. So this is the outcome of the analysis that we have in the chapter 3. Then we dig deeper into the a bit more technical to look at the determinants of employment, wage, and productivity. So we have the series of model here. All the econometric works we bring into this chapter. So the previous one was more descriptive. And then in the chapter 6, we have to look at one of the most important issue in Indonesia as a large and diverse country, which is the spatial variations. And then we discuss that one in the context of inequality, employment, and manufacturing. So we stick to the manufacturing then. And then the last one, we have the policy implications. Let's look at more about what we have inside the chapter. Introductions. Let's look at the overall background of the Indonesian economy for the past after the crisis. So we have this kind of situations before the crisis. The first one is we have the dominance, more superior performance of manufacturing over the overall performance of the economy. And then what we have during the period also is the rapid industrializations in the country. And then another one, what we observed was stable inequality during the period that we are referring to. Then you will find the opposite situations with regard to what happened after the crisis. So we have this one. We have the premature, the poor performance of, relatively poor performance of manufacturing vis-a-vis the overall economic performance. And then we have the premature de-industrializations. And then, of course, all of us know that the manufacturing has been, growth has been jobless. And then this is something that we found in the series of studies that we did for the ILO, which is the de-alignment between productivity growth and employment growth. So a kind of disjoint. Disjoint between wage and productivity growth. And then coincidentally during the period we observe the significant increase in overall inequality in the country. So you can see the stark contrast between pre and post crisis period in Indonesia. This is just to back up what we have said before. We have the long-term growth of the overall economy and the manufacturing. We can see that one, the difference between pre and post Asian crisis. And then this is the more detailed, the decline in the employment growth and stagnant structural change. And you can see that one, that after the crisis, employment growth in agriculture is higher than the pre-crisis. And then, but in the manufacturing sector, in the constructions, in the trade, the key economic sector, you can see that the decline in the employment growth. And then you see here also the jobless growth in key sectors of the economy. Look at the manufacturing, look at that in transport, you look at the in the trade, you have declining output and employment elasticity. And then with regard to the overview of the employment situations, the key argument is we need to move from quantity to quality. It has been well known in the literature that if you are looking in the situation in the developing country, if you stick to the open unemployment rate, this is not a good indicator of development progress. But instead, we need to look at the indicators reflecting the quality of employment. What are the variables that we need to look at? The first one is formal employment or decent job in the more recent literature. And then we have the figure of underemployment, what happened to underemployment, and then what happened to real wage, what happened to the incidence of low pay, which is representing the inequality. Is there an improvement in terms of incidence of low pay? So let's look at the data then. This is the data on the quantity of employment. Yes, we have the continuous decline in unemployment rate in Indonesia from 11.2, the peak was in 2005, and then keep declining. The question is, how low can you go? Probably we are at the level of the so-called natural rate of employment. So pushing down will have no meaning. So this is not the point. So if we look at the policy government saying that we want to make 5.6% unemployment to 2% of unemployment rate, we have to be really careful with this kind of. We have a detailed analysis of regional comparison in the book. What is the meaning of having 5% of unemployment rate? What is the meaning of we have 2%? So if you want to find the place in Indonesia, region in Indonesia with 2% of level of open unemployment rate, we have to get to East Nusa Tenggara, the poorest province in Indonesia. They can't afford to be unemployed because they are so poor, they can't afford to be unemployed. If you go to Banten with better prospect of economy, job and income, they can't afford to be unemployed, to wait for better opportunities. So meaning that they have the basis to be unemployed. So we have to frame that one from that perspective. So this is about the quantity. What about the quality? This is the medium term, quite longer trend of formal employment from 2001-2016. Look at the black color. You can see that one relatively stagnant share of formal employment in Indonesia from 2001 till 2010-2011. After that, start to improve. So we were in the longer period of stagnations in terms of improving employment quality. And then this is the level of underemployment. Look at, very stable. So the overall underemployment, which is the blue line, from 2001 and 1990, in fact, and 2016, quite stable, around 40%. It's no improvement in terms of the level of underemployment. And then we disaggregate the level of underemployment in terms of the severity of how unemployed they are. And then we have the low pay incidence. So the definition of low pay incidence is if your income or earning is less than half of the median wage or median earnings. That's the definition of low pay. So it's a relative measure. And look at the red line. There is no improvement for the past 15, 16 years. And then we divide that one into male and female, and then that's the figure. And then that's about the overall situations of employment situations. Then chapter 3, this is about earning, productivity, and inequality. Then our key points is, you look at this one. The de-alignment between productivity and wage. The gap is getting bigger, and then if you take the ratio, you have this one. Wage productivity ratio keep declining. And we have the, look at the black figure, a black line for the overall economy, and then we have the other 4 lines for the the 3 lines for the, for 4 lines, sorry, for the most dominant economic sector. So the 4 sectors accounts for 85% of total employment. Then this is the inequality. We have, this is the longest series of inequality that we can provide. So we have here 2 sources of data for the inequality. The first one is the Susanas one, the most well-known data that we use, the blue dots. And then we construct the Gini data, long-term data for the red line. This is for the regular wage earnings of regular employment. We have the longest series. And then after 2001, we can construct also the Gini index of the earnings for not only for the regular employment, but also for the on-account workers and then casual employment. So the coverage of the black line is larger than, a little bit larger than the coverage of the red one. But what is the point here? The point here is the inequality of income is higher than compared to inequality in terms of consumptions, which is can be explained. So chapter 4, we dig deeper into the manufacturing sector. So the point here is, let's look at this one, the long-term trend of productivity across 4 dominant economic sector. Look at here. Manufacturing has the highest productivity. 1. Second, the productivity growth in the manufacturing sector is the best compared to the other 3 sectors. So that's why the data direct us to the importance of the manufacturing sector. And then this one, let's we combine this one, the productivity trend and then the trend of productivity ratio. Let's look at the manufacturing sector. Here we have the highest productivity and the superior growth trend. And in terms of the wage productivity ratio, initial decline is happening for the manufacturing sector, but after 2008, 2007, the trend start to improve. But it is not the case for the other dominant economic sector. So that's why we need to look deeper into the role of the manufacturing sector. And then we move to the more technical chapter on chapter 5. On the determinants of employment, wage, and productivity. So our key point here is 3 things. The first one is, we found that productivity is the most important determinant of real wage. And then next to that one is capital intensity. And surprisingly, not surprisingly by the way, we put the other very well-known variable in the context of manufacturing, which is the export orientations and foreign ownerships. But those 2 variables have no significant effect on productivity in the context of post-crisis Indonesia. So probably the situation will be different if we look at the data before the crisis, during the 1980s, 1990s. And then this is the key result of the estimate. They are related. 3 factors are related here. If you have productivity, and then productivity will affect wage, as we stated in the first key findings. And then both of them, productivity will affect wage, and then both of them will encourage employment. So they move together. So we have the simultaneous equations there. We estimate for the manufacturing sector, and then we dig deeper into the large and medium sector in the manufacturing, the modern dynamic segment of the manufacturing. And then the ideal scenario where you have productivity, wages, and employment move together and the economy expand, we find that one in the case of large and medium manufacturing sector. So we are going deeper and deeper. The first one is overall economy, and then we look at manufacturing, and then we concentrate on the large and medium segment of the manufacturing sector. Okay, a little bit of overview of the special dimensions. Okay, look at this one. Where is the concentrations of manufacturing sector in Indonesia? Basically only concentrated in few provinces like Riau, Banten, West Java, and Central Java, and then the rest will have very small contribution. So the question is, probably the policy question is how to spread this one to the different parts of Indonesia. And then what about the variations of wage across province in Indonesia? So this is where we have. So we have the center of the high wage economy in Indonesia, but in other parts of Indonesia we still have pockets of low wage. So something that can affect the distributions of economic activities. And then this is more important. We are saying, we have been saying that manufacturing is the key here. So we have a very simple correlations between the manufacturing share and the increase in the Gini index for the past 15 years, since 2001 till 2015-16. And then what we have here, provinces with the higher share of manufacturing will have the slower increase in inequality. So the point here is manufacturing slows inequality growth. And then on the right figures, manufacturing also improves the quality of employment. We have the positive correlations between the share of manufacturing and the share of formal employment across regions in Indonesia. So this is why we conclude that manufacturing is the key. So now is I hand over to my co-author to deal with the more difficult part of the book.
Thank you, Zulfan. You don't leave me alone. I was trying to help, just anyway. It's okay. Now, before I go into that, and let me emphasize what is the novel feature of this book. The first novel feature of this book is the first book which tried I'm not saying that it's an exhaustive study, to provide a special dimension. Most of the books that were written on Indonesia basically aggregate picture, and that aggregate picture is distorted by the influence of Java and Jakarta and that kind of thing. And when we talk about industry, you have seen the industries are only concentrated in few areas. So this is the first thing. We have tried to provide a future research direction. Especially SMERU is a research institute where they can pick up on this one. We have provided some guidance where the research has to be directed. So this is one very noble feature for this book, we thought. The second noble feature is we try to bring together various strands of thought like productivity growth, wages, employment, and things like that. And if you look at the studies on wages and employment, most of the studies that we have come across are very partial. It is very the econometric studies. If you look at that, will be obviously for wages and employment will be negatively related. Because this is a standard thing, and if you find that negative relationship, there is no surprise. But we looked at it from the macro perspective, because wage is not just a cost for the industry. Wage is also income for the workers, which goes into spending. So that part was missing in most of the studies that we have come across when we are trying to do this book. And where Zulfan showed that where we found wages, productivity, and employment growing together. That is the ideal scenario. We said we can find a situation where these three are moving together. That's the best for us. So where we can find it, we found that the likelihood of three moving together, which is the desired scenario, is in the large and medium-sized manufacturing. And this is the policy challenge, meaning we have a huge number of small and medium, small and micro enterprises. How we help them to graduate into that type, because that is the ideal situation. Okay, so let me move on to my section. So just to summarize where Zulfan left. Now, the three interrelated challenges we have identified: premature de-industrialization, and Zulfan mentioned that; stall structural changes, persistence of informality, that is the quality of employment, and the rising inequality. And these are the three key challenges that the policymakers have to address in a different context. Why we have the title post Soeharto Indonesia? Because in the previous pre-crisis period, we had a different environment. Now we have a more democratic society. So the accountability, demand, and expectation is far higher than it was before the crisis. So if we are talking about wage repression, labor repression, this won't happen. You can't do that. So you cannot recreate the miracle of the past. That's gone. And it is decentralized economy. So again, for the policy purpose or the planning purpose, is a big challenge, especially the challenge to maintain a one economy, not a fragmented economy, various regions having their own taxes, own regulations, own things, and that will fragment the economy. So how we maintain that, that is a big challenge. And of course, the global environment is very uncertain now. It's very challenging. We are getting challenged from low cost other countries like Cambodia, Bangladesh competing. Plus, the world trade is stalls in the Great Depression, Great Recession of 2008-2009. Now there is a specter of trade war and currency war. And everything now is clouding. So we simply, to summarize, simply cannot go back to the nostalgia of the past. We have to think forward. So here we say that the diversity, this is the spatial dimension that we talked about, is actually a good thing for Indonesia. We can think of Indonesia not one country. We can think of Indonesia is a country of countries, okay? Because different provinces have got different socioeconomic level of development, and we have seen even the wages are different, and you also have different minimum wages in different areas and provinces. So, and different resource endowment, from natural resource to human resource endowment. Why can't we then create a synergies between different regions and create the internal dynamism? So what we had in the previous time was a flying geese model in an international specialization situation. Japan at the front, and then the newly industrializing economies of Korea, Taiwan, and those countries. And then we have the second tier, which is ASEAN, and then so on. That is fine. I mean, that model worked, and that model may still work for countries like for province like say Jakarta and those areas which is at the higher end of the manufacturing. And also what we have seen in the previous diagram, that in the determinants, the foreign ownership and export orientation was not a significant determinant of productivity, and that is contrary to what we normally believe, that export orientation and foreign investment, foreign ownership is good for productivity. That may have been the case in the past. So that also raises the doubt about going after the value chain. The value chain, the global value chain, it has become a catchword now. But the kind of value we are catching is very small, and that is reflected. So the foreign ownership, and so maybe for Indonesia, especially for the high end thing, trying to catch anyway the value chain is happening only at the low end mostly. And that was a debate even we had in the context of Malaysia when Malaysia was moved into electronics. Was electronic that Malaysia was producing was a high end, high skill, or just low skill assembly operations and labor intensive. So the value chain and the value we are capturing is very small, and so that is reflected in econometrics. So here we say that if we want to, what is the key policy variable that can address the democratization aspiration as well as can be a very non-distorting industry policy. And one item we found is the minimum wage. The minimum wage has a positive impact on inequality. That if the compliance of minimum wage increases, inequality declines, and there is a picture on that. Yeah, that this is the picture. You can see the blue line is a hypothetical line where we say that let us assume that minimum wage is 100% compliant, and even if minimum wage is not 100% compliant, it acts as a lighthouse. It gives a signal. So we cannot expect 100% compliance, but having a good minimum wage is helpful because that gives the signaling. So the minimum wage is important. And then if we look at the minimum wage variation, and there is a significant variation among the minimum wage. So that's good because the provinces, the districts which are socioeconomically at a lower level should have lower minimum wage because the cost of living is low there if it is linked to that. So to set the minimum wage based on a national average will be a wrong thing. That will be distorting because and that will also reduce the compliance rate because the poorer provinces will won't be able to afford that minimum wage. The ideal is to find a minimum wage which is consistent with the local environment, and that way we can have the minimum wage affects all the industry. We don't have to go and choose the industry, selective industry policy, which is lots of pitfalls. You can make mistakes in choosing. How do you pick the winners? We don't know. But if we can set a minimum wage, then that will that has an effect on the industrial structure. The industries which cannot afford to pay even the minimum wage based on the local condition, meaning that those industries are useless. I mean, we should not have them. They should go out. I mean, we should not worry. But this is the natural process of a structural change. And industries which are smarter, go better, and they will be paying, if they pay the minimum wage or close to minimum wage, they will have a rent above that wage, which is an extra profit for them, being more dynamic. So they will be reinvesting that extra profit. That generates the dynamism. I give you one example from our next door neighbor. Even though it's a small island economy, Indonesia, Singapore. Singapore used the minimum wage setting in the 80s, early 80s, to restructure the economy. I mean, they went too fast, of course. I mean, and then they realized they were going too fast. They adjusted. But wage is an important industry policy instrument, and wage is basically nothing more than different than having an exchange rate policy as an industry policy instrument. So that's where we will stop. I think what we have found, again, to emphasize that we have to focus on, let me go back to the key policy message. Yeah. So that's where we will stop, and thank you all of you for coming and listening to the presentations. Thanks. We're open for questions.
Thank you, Pak Zulfan and Pak Anies, for having presented the summary of the book. I think it's very clear to us that the book raises very important issues for Indonesia. So maybe Pak Leo and Pak Teguh can think of these issues and incorporate them into the next RPJMN. So to discuss further this issue, we will continue with the discussion section. So we need some time to arrange the stage. So as I mentioned earlier, that we will have three discussion. But before that, maybe Pak Leo would like to go back to BAPPENAS. Thank you. So now I would like to call our discussions, Ibu Profesor Armida, Pak Mr. Esam Alqararah, and Toshi Chatani to go to stage, and also the authors of book, Pak Zulfan and Pak Anis to join us here at the front. Silakan di mana aja, Bu. So in this session, each of the discussion will give their views, comments, or raise questions about the issues raised in the book. Maybe about 10 to 15 minutes each. Yeah. So let's start with Ibu Profesor Armida. Ibu silakan.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. A very good morning to all of you. First of all, I would like to congratulate Mas Tadjoeddin dan Pak Anis for the very timely book on employment and re-industrialization in post-Soeharto Indonesia. My notes, rather than comments, notes would consist of three major issues. More on how we are going to use the results, the excellence publication results of the book for us to move forward, especially more on in terms of policy implication. So the three issues that I would like to take it as a note on the book is one is related to more or less to the title of the book. So when I first received the PowerPoint presentation, I look at the title Employment and Re-industrialization, especially re-industrialization. I'm going to comment on that. Second is on the period of analysis. I have an opinion that some of the analysis maybe would benefit from a more detailed sub period of especially for the period after the Asian financial crisis. Third is more on the topic of interest, my bias for the implication for regional development in Indonesia. So let me start with the first issue. Industrialization, manufacturing sector. Well, if we follow the discussion, especially not only in, among academics, but I think it's quite wide-ranging discussion, not only in Indonesia but everywhere, on the de-industrialization or premature de-industrialization. If we look at countries such as Korea, many take Korea as example or Japan as example. When their industry sector more or less plateau, become let's say stagnant, percentage-wise as percentage of GDP, they already reach a certain level of GDP per capita quite high. Yeah. Then they plateau or a little bit less, and then the tertiary sector become more prominent. But in the case of Indonesia, why it's called premature deindustrialization? Because Indonesia manufacturing sector become stagnant or a little bit decreasing, at, let's say, at quite still low, GDP per capita. So that's why it's called premature deindustrialization. But the question is whether this only happens to Indonesia. And now, the discussion, or debate is, well, look, it's not only Indonesia. It happens to many other countries, especially many other developing countries. So, is it a new normal or what? Yeah, because I think, this has wide implication for the future. When we read, the book in whole, and then we think, okay, well, the consensus is, it appears that we have to re-industrialize. The question is whether it is the correct answer. So my note is, well, we have to be uh, more. We have to do some more, more in-depth study and relate that to the future trend. Second, on the period of analysis, although I haven't read the book in full, maybe in the complete what book, the details is there, but just from the PowerPoint, maybe I missed something. Especially after the Asian financial crisis, jadi post 1999, I think any analysis would benefit from a more detailed sub-analysis. To give you an example, why that is the case, we have, or the world have, another global financial crisis, 2008. It also transformed somewhat, not only Indonesia, everybody, with quantitative easing. That has huge impact everywhere, including Indonesia. And then after that, 2012, 2013, the tapering, another impact with huge repercussion to the several sector, in the economy, including Indonesia. I'm sure it has huge impact. Why in Indonesia the so-called tertiarization, tertiary sector becoming more prominent. That's one of the factor. And then more recently, the past 1 or 2 years, all of us already know the impact of digital economy, frontier technology, and then more recently the trade war, the Trump policy, and so on and so forth. As Pa Anis already alluded earlier, most likely, the future trend would be more different, than the past trend. So my point is, when you are going to derive, the policy implication, especially for Indonesia in this case, based on the book, be careful. Look both ways. The past trend, of course, there are many lessons learned from the past trends, as always, and also the future trend. We have to combine them. And the third point is on the region implication, regional development. I just came from Solo, yesterday. We had a very, very good conference, the IRSA, Indonesian Regional Science Association conference in Solo. We discussed many issues and so on and so forth. And I remember, one of the dinner speech, Pak Iwan Jaya Aziz, dinner speech Pak Iwan Jaya Aziz. He mentioned to all of us that make us more realize, that location of investment, location of where investor going to invest, the industry and so on and so forth. Not only is affected by the type of the industry, whether it's natural resource based, food loss, market based. That's of course, but also like location. When you potential investor has to decide between location A, location B. All other specification or preconditions on the same, but then the next, at the next level, the location itself are endogenous. Why? Because special economics is not like conventional economics, special economics, then we are dealing with the so-called monopolistic competition. So each region offer its own characteristic or advantages or disadvantages, in that case, So this also will play, whether in this case, I'm sure the employment or the what SDM, the availability of workforce and so on and so forth, maybe one of the issue that will be looked at by the potential investor. So these are becoming more and more important. And then the issue of global value chain, in which Indonesia, according to various studies, Indonesia, for some reason, for uh, more detailed reasons, are why Indonesia cannot benefit or enter the global value chain, unlike Vietnam, for example, our neighbor countries. That's also important, and it will affect how the manufacturing sector, industry sector can develop, also related to each specific regions. And then last point, related to the regions, is of course in which the book devoted the research on is on the employment generation and implication on employment generation, on also the workers skills, type of skills needed, maybe another book, nanti Mas Zulfan, Pak Anis, because I'm not sure whether in the book you already talk about certain skills needed and so on. So not yet, Nah ini juga one issue which are very important, because when you try to reindustrialize, not only industry, maybe tertiarization, service sector, and so on and so forth, then you also have to think about what kind of skills apa namanya that needs to be yang disiapkan for the workers, for that particular sector subsector to be able to be developed in that certain region. Okay, with that I end my notes, and again congratulations Pak Mas Zulfan and Pak Anis for the excellent book. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih Ibu. Let's continue with the next discussion. Mr. Kazutoshi Chatani from ILO.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kazutoshi Chatani from ILO. I'm employment specialist at the ILO Jakarta office. This is my second time to be stationed in Jakarta, and quite happy to be back in Jakarta and work for Indonesia and look at the Indonesian labor market. First of all, I'd like to thank SMERU for inviting the ILO to this important discussion and book launch. And I certainly like to join the previous speakers to congratulate the authors, Dr. Tadjoeddin and Dr. Chowdhury, for publishing this important publication that would contribute a lot to the policy discussion debates in Indonesia when it comes to employment labor policies. And I must confess that I face a challenge in commenting on this publication, because the two authors are obviously, as you know, among the most prominent authors, researchers of Indonesian labor market. Their decades-long hard work and analysis are crystallized into this publication. Obviously, commenting on this publication, not that easy job, but nonetheless, I'd like to try. I think the contribution to this publication obviously looked at the past trends and looked back with the Soeharto era and then post Asian financial crisis time, and look at how long we came when it comes to employment, industrialization, and poverty reduction. I think our job, policymakers, social partners, and international organizations, academic experts, based on this publication, is to think about, envisage future trends, and prepare ourselves policy interventions. In my humble opinion, Indonesia is entering into a golden age of opportunities. I'm quite positive when it comes to employment in Indonesia. Quite positive, optimistic. Of course, this doesn't mean that I neglect all the issues that we see. But if we look at these socioeconomic conditions, growing population and expanding middle class, rapidly increasing demand for higher end products, this alone creates a lot of labor demand and opportunities. Now, I worked on employment issues and employment policies in many countries, Central Asia, and Timor-Leste, Indonesia, North Africa, and also Eastern Africa, and Indonesia. If I look at Indonesian, the basis for employment creation, Indonesia is endowed with perhaps most fortunate fundamentals. Now, Indonesia, I think of course, there are many ways of growing economies. Obviously, first one is domestic consumption, which is the biggest motor of growth in Indonesia. Of course, I think the author also mentioned export. And of course, many countries rely on public investment in infrastructure, those for growth. But I think Indonesia, the case for Indonesia is really the motor, most reliable and perhaps performing motor of economic growth and job creation is domestic consumption. And this, I think the author already highlighted in publication, but I think we like to re-emphasize the importance of maintaining or even accelerating this momentum of consumption. Now, population growing, and then middle class is expanding, poverty is declining. Now, if we continue these trends, and if we mix right policy interventions, we can grab opportunities. And we probably see golden time once again in where we see rapidly declining poverty and rapidly improving the condition of living. Now, what kind of policy intervention can help us to grab that opportunity that opened up? That, I think, one of the key questions I like to ask. And I think one of the key questions perhaps policymakers should be thinking about. And let me quickly state three things. One, how to maintain consumption, this trend. One is obviously, author already highlighted important wage. Yes, wage is important because we need to maintain or actually increase disposable income. Now, here, labor productivity is important, as the authors already highlighted. Wages, minimum wages, this is really important. And disposable income, household income, that's we need to pay attention to. If someone asks me to select a few indicators of labor market economy, I would definitely choose disposable income to watch Indonesian labor market because domestic consumption is key. And inflation prices, perhaps second indicator I would look at. Now, second, I think Dr. Chowdhury already highlighted. We can't look back and we can look at the past time when Indonesia economy grew based on cheap labor. No, we can't go back anymore, obviously. And obviously, we need to shift production to a higher end. If we try re-industrialization, our focus obviously should be shifting the production basis to higher end. What is needed? Capital investment and investment in human capital. That's key. But my second point is actually this capital investment. Now, we see a lot of construction in Indonesia. If you take highway from here, Jakarta to Bekasi, Cikarang, you see highway, the LRT constructed, and you see massive investment in large-scale infrastructure. I think this is the right thing. I hear newspaper, I read newspapers, and of course there's some criticism, there's some action here and there. But I think the investment, large-scale investment in infrastructure is right answer to boost economy and also help industrial growth. The other is more micro level access to capital issue. Can entrepreneurs or existing enterprises access to capital, borrow money from banks and reinvest and either create new businesses or expand existing businesses? That's, I think, remain key issue. Finance. How this financing business, financing expansion. A business is actually agent of tapping existing opportunities, and expanding business or enterprise is key when it comes to, of course, tapping opportunities and also job creation. Access to finance, I think another thing we need to look at. What kind of banking mechanism we have? Are they efficient enough? What is the interest rate? And here, some issues here we see is like weakening rupees nowadays, and then central banks have had to jack up interest rate, which of course affect lending rate of commercial banks, and which perhaps slows down the business growth, perhaps. But I think we need to look at those access to finance capital issues. The last one, I think Ibu Armida already highlighted human capital. That is key. When economy grows and if the manufacturing shifts to produce higher end product and compete in higher segment with the manufacturing with neighboring countries, skills development is key. Now here, if you compare academic education, general education, and vocational education costs more. It's more expensive. And the question is how to finance this skills development. Now, many people might think, no, because taxpayer, we are paying tax. The government has obligation to provide social services, including education and healthcare and others. We tend to think, oh, it's government job. But I think we need to step back and think how to finance, what is the most cost-effective way of financing skills development in coming years. Here, I think cost sharing the burden of skill development among the broader shoulder of not only the government, but social partners, enterprises, key. Now, education has improved a lot in Indonesia. There are more and more people going to universities, and SM cards has been improving. Perhaps we need to go a bit further. And there, and the public sector can play an important role in educating skilled young people. Look, nowadays I quite encouraged to hear that the current president and the government focuses on apprenticeships. It's not internship, it's apprenticeships. That's basically education and private sectors coming together to deliver skills training that is needed to meet the growing demand of skills from the enterprises. Apprenticeship, just highlight one aspect of apprenticeships. It's basically investment of the enterprises because they pay allowance, one cycle, for apprentices who have basically no skills, but they invest in it, and then they gain when the apprentices are trained. They become more productive. Apprentices, they pay because they receive lower wages, lower than minimum. One cycle is set lower than minimum wages. But then they gain if they get skills and they get employment after. Government is not investing in it. But the government gains after because if we have more productive workers, and perhaps government will recover the cost by receiving higher tax incomes. And I think this model of like cost sharing or co-financing skills development, I think is a good model. And I think many countries have succeeded in this. I think Indonesia has an opportunity to do so, I think, coming years. So I think let me once again congratulate the authors, Dr. Tadjoeddin and Dr. Chowdhury, and it's great pleasure to see you. It's also I'm quite humbled that the authors mentioned ILO's contribution to this publication. But thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you, Kazu, especially for your optimistic point of view about employment situation in Indonesia in the future. But let's see that from the re-industrialization point of view now from Mr. Esam Alqararah. Please.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سلامات باقي and السلام عليكم. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Surya Hadi, I hope that I pronounce it properly, for inviting me today to participate in this very important discussion in launching this report. And I would like to congratulate and praise the efforts of both the two scientists, Dr. Tadjoeddin and Professor Chowdhury, for their distinguished research, which addressed very important issue on industrialization and employment in Indonesia. The report would definitely trigger further research and also would be a tool for the decision makers to design relevant policies for revitalization the sector in this great country of Indonesia. In view of the limited time slot given to me, I'm going to restrict my intervention to specific key issues that has been addressed by the report, and also would like to try to highlight the perspectives of UNIDO accordingly. First of all, I will start with the main posit of the report, that Indonesia is facing this de-industrialization, and the report rightly raised the diminished international competitiveness of the manufacturing industry sector of Indonesia. In UNIDO, we believe that the industrial showdown is a cause for concern to the extent that it is linked with declining competitiveness. The manufacturing sector, as you know, usually has higher productivity than other sectors, and it is a center for technological development and innovation. The development of the manufacturing also usually drives the growth of other sectors due to its strong backward linkage. UNIDO recently, ladies and gentlemen, studied whether the importance of manufacturing in economic development has changed or not, and concluded that the characteristics of manufacturing as engine of growth has not changed. However, globally, the shares of manufacturing value added and employment has not also changed. In short, the declining of the manufacturing value chain and employment share in many developing countries, or what's called the premature de-industrialization, have not been caused by change in manufacturing activities, but mostly can be attributed to the country-specific factors, such as commodity trap and policies. And this means that there are ample opportunities for countries like Indonesia to improve manufacturing performance and industrialization. Second, the report highlighted that the most negative consequences of premature deindustrialization is a growing disjoint between productivity and real earning growth, which has resulted in growing wage inequality. In fact, historically, ladies and gentlemen, the manufacturing contributed to the expansion of the middle income class, resulting in reduction of income inequality. The UNIDO UNIDO Industrial Development Report, which has been launched recently in early 2018, for the first time provide a framework that capture interactive nature of consumption of the industrial development, which has been supported by empirical evidence. So far, the industrial development has typically studied from the supply side perspective, ignoring the importance of demand. The UNIDO report suggests that individual development doesn't occur in vacuum. It can take place only if there is a sufficient demand for manufacturing goods. Consumers thus play a key role in the consolidation of the manufacturing sector, and therefore domestic consumption is a key component of demand. The importance of domestic demand as a source of income has increased across all countries in recent years. Wages are not just a production cost, as was mentioned in the presentation, but they are also a fundamental driver of aggregate demand. A country with high income inequality may have too few consumers to sustain domestic manufacturing production. Three, the report argues that Indonesia cannot recreate the manufacturing miracle of the past based on the repression of labor for whatever the reason is, particularly because the perpetuation of low wage will trap Indonesia in low productivity. And UNIDO strongly support this argument. UNIDO vision is that no one should be left behind in benefiting from the industrial development, and that the prosperity it creates should be shared by all people in the country. And for this to happen, countries need to be involved in the process of industrialization. This requires building industrial capabilities and serve new and more sophisticated demand for consumer. Manufacturing also is an important source for female employment, especially in export manufacturing. This would be an element worthy to be of a deeper exploration in Indonesia, especially in rural areas. The fourth point I would like to address is that the report highlighted the manufacturing is still the best potential to become the engine of growth. And it is average labor productivity is significantly more than others, particularly the agriculture sector. In fact, the dramatic decline in commodity prices since 2012 has also created an opportunity for the manufacturing sector to regain the momentum. And UNIDO strongly support this conclusion. And in fact, the empirical evidence presented in our report highlighted that manufacturing is not losing its significance globally. It shows that global trends have led to some observers to mistakenly, erroneously concluded that manufacturing is no longer a key sector of the economy. This claim, however, is typically made based on the nominal value added product in manufacturing. And they concluded accordingly that the manufacturing production has declined, suggesting the process of de-industrialization globally. This conclusion is driven, as I highlighted earlier, from the production angle. But if we place demand at the center of the attention, other features became more important. What matters for consumer is not the share of manufacturing in the global GDP, but the creation of new products that became better and cheaper over time. UNIDO agrees that the rate of deindustrialization should be reduced by improving competitiveness of the domestic products, boosting new investments, and increasing labor productivity. These efforts need to be complemented by endeavors to integrate environmental sustainability as well. This is also scope to explore how technology, there is also a scope to explore how technology and innovation can play a role on this. With this, I would like to conclude my intervention, and thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Esam Alqararah. I think also gives us some hope, yeah, that re-industrialization can actually be implemented, yeah, if we can devise the right policy. Before I go to the audience, I would like to give the opportunity to the authors to respond, perhaps each, yeah, for Pak Zulfan and Pak Ani. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, the distinguished panelists, for raising some very important questions. Let me address to the very serious question and very an important question that Ibu Armida raised about the whether the deindustrialization, premature deindustrialization is a new normal because in many other countries it's happening. This is true, and we have to really be careful about making a very big claim in Indonesia. But the issue is if you look at the aggregate of Indonesia and compare Indonesia with say South Korea and or with Malaysia, yes, it is a kind of a very normal. They are also facing the similar situation. But as I said, Indonesia is a country of countries. If you look at the special distribution, in some and majority of districts there was no industry, so there is still scope for industrialization in those countries, those areas. So that's why we have to focus. That is part of the regional balanced development. So Armita mentioned about the regional development. So that if you look at the regional development, we cannot bypass that phase because the countries develop from agriculture to manufacturing, then the service sector. So basically, there is a scope in that provinces. I think is an important thing. And also the issues of sub period is also very important, especially the decline in commodity prices, the commodity price cycle that has happened, and how it affected Indonesia. And obviously in one book we could not do everything, but as I said, this is the right place. As I mentioned, in the SMERU being the prime research center, this is an important area that Armida alluded to. I think no, the researchers, young researchers in Indonesia should be picking up that one, how the spillover effects from developed countries, because they can't. This is I said that now the world is more challenged. That the one of the change environment is more challenged than it was before. The international financial architecture is in a complete disorder. There's no order in there. So how we handle the macroeconomic part of that, it is a book itself, and I really thank Ibu Armida for directing our attention to that. And then she also mentioned about, I don't want to go into the value chain issue because that is part of the industrialization, and there are some provinces which, as I said, the domestic market, creation of domestic market and internal dynamism and linkages between the various industries and regions is the key. The skill part is obviously important. But most of the time, when we talk about the skill part, it is standard approach is from the supply side. Do the training, expand the vocational institution, expand the higher education, whatever. So all this supply side thing, and industry always complaining of universities are creating students which are not employable. Obviously, universities cannot produce graduates for every industry that is there. What the universities do, produce students who can think, who can analyze, and who can write. It's basic competencies, and it is the job of the industry to train them. And this is what, as you mentioned, that the industries are not coming forward, and this apprenticeship system is the way to go. We cannot change the tail all the time because the world will change, and university cannot change the course program and every year, every 6 months. It's not possible. What we should ask the university to produce is students who are properly numerate and literate, who can think, analyze, and synthesize what is happening. And this is unfortunately doesn't happen in our part of the world, because we just memorize, we reproduce, and we get marks based on how much we reproduce from the memory. The books that we're studying are all written in the West and have got no relevance of the based on in this country. Are we able to translate that to our Indonesian context? That is what the universities and the schools should be doing, and rather than training students for every little industries that skill we need. It's not possible. Okay, So that industry has to come with do the on the job training. They cannot avoid that. And if you have a basically trained people, it can be retrained. Then you know you need the why we emphasize the minimum wage. As I come back to that, because it linked to your consumption domestic market. It also links to the inequality, because inequality negatively affects the domestic market. Okay, there are social issues, political issues linked to inequality. We are not going through that, but just even if we concentrate on the economic part of it, wages policy has a significant role, because you cannot manipulate exchange rate now. Because we have a flexible exchange rate, plus you have this as I said, the financial world financial system is very different, and every time you try to manipulate the exchange rate, there will be a complaint. But wage is basically is a form of exchange rate policy. So and that affects your competitiveness. You talked about the competitiveness issue. But the other thing is that we cannot recreate the past we mentioned, but we can recreate the past in some parts of Indonesia. The parts that are still underdeveloped, we can still go there and set up industries which are low labor cost, labor intensive, very standardized product, in say like in Sutanga and those kind of places where there is no industry, but there you have a population. They need job. The agriculture is also not very viable in those places. So the infrastructure investment to connect all these island provinces is very important, as you mentioned about the infrastructure. About the access to finance, nobody will disagree on the access to finance. Is the good banking sector, good governance, these are all important. But also important is, where is the source of finance? Do you borrow overseas, or do you borrow domestically? These are macro issues which we did not, but these are important research issues. Where do you borrow? And does Indonesia have enough supply of domestic savings? That is also important, because the most important determinant of saving is income. If income growth is not there, so you may have a very fantastic banking system, but there is no money in the bank because nobody is saving in the bank. So it's not just a straightforward access to the thing. So we need to. These are important. I keep saying these are important research questions. And thanks for raising those things. And maybe we can do more collaborative research. And finally, of course, the buzzword is environmental, the sustainable development. Armida is a sustainable development warrior. And all this industrialization, we said we have to do this. Unfortunately, we did not touch that part in this book. And when we say we have to re-industrialize, we talked about the wage policy, and we completely sidetrack the issue of environment and technology. What kind of good technology which is environmentally friendly? Because the reason we avoided that, because this itself is a huge task which we could not. But this is an important and very important thing, because without sustainable production framework, we cannot go very far. And this is, we have already committed ourselves in the UN agreement that and Indonesia played a very, very significant role, and Armida was the minister at that time in developing the sustainable development goals. And industrialization and structural change is they are part of the
research, because if you are a good researcher,
now we should move on with the this question and answer with the audience. So for the first term, I would like to give an opportunity to maybe 3 comments and questions. Pak Hari, Pak Teguh, ada lagi? Ya, Ibu. Okay. Let's start with Pak Hari.
Thank you, Pak Asep. As Zulfan said, a question raises another question. Zulfan and Anis, thank you very much for the book. But then it is interesting. You said that it is not export-oriented manufacturing. It is not foreign-owned manufacturing. But then your recommendation is we have to go large and medium. And the second one, you still have a belief on the flying geese of Indonesia. Start from Java with and other things, and followed by Rio. And how do you relate this phenomenon that you met? A question that raises another question. The second one is why Soeharto? Do you have another label other than Soeharto? Yes, right. you know, okay, okay. Tommy is running for something, right? Okay. That is going to be dangerous.
Thank you, Mas Zulfan and Professor Anis. I would like to have one comments and maybe two questions. The first comment is that your study confirmed with our plan for the next 5 years that the government would like to focus more on the manufacturing sector. So the reason is in line with your analysis. I think one of the interesting point that with Pahari also has raised about the export orientation and foreign ownership enterprises do not significantly determine where, the productivity, and it's true. Basically, for example, Indofood, they are more focusing on domestic market. They have the higher productivity than export oriented ones. But at the same time, Mayora, who also focus more on international market, they do have higher productivity as well. So it depends on how we can compare. But mostly, if we are talking about food processing sector, subsectors, the gap is wide. So the one on one side is very sophisticated, high productivity enterprises, and the other side is very traditional home industry type of enterprises. So, but this the analysis also confirm these trends in manufacturing sector in Indonesia. The comments also related to the product, the compliance on the wage. No, my question is now is related to the compliance of the wage. As one of the key policy message is compliance, wage compliance is one of the key factor that can increase either reduce inequality and also increase productivity. But at the same time, around 94% of our workforce are in small and medium enterprises, micro and small and medium enterprises. So the challenge is because wage compliance is one of the issue raised by the industry. In fact, raised by the industry because of our rigidity in the wage regulation. But at the same time, there is still challenge on how we can improve the capability of small and medium enterprise to comply with your key recommendation. Do you have any insight on how maybe from other countries on how we can promote this? Yeah. And then my second question is related to your analysis whether you differentiate between oil and gas manufacturing, or you, because as I observe from the analysis result of the performance or productivity of each province, it seems that it's a total manufacturing sector. So because in some province, if we are separate the oil and gas manufacturing with the non-oil and gas manufacturing, uh, uh, the performance will be different because most of non-oil and gas manufacturing outside Java run by small and medium enterprises. in terms of skill. So there is also another question about productivity. So I would like to ask about your confirmation about whether it's a total manufacturing sector or you differentiate between these topics. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Teguh. Pak Teguh is the Director of Industry at BAPPENAS. Pak Hari earlier is from, if I'm not mistaken, Global Green Growth Institute. Is that correct, Pak? Yeah, okay. So Ibu, please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Hello, my name is Ayumi from KPPOD or Regional Autonomy Watch. First of all, maybe I'm very sorry if I have grammatical errors everywhere. So first of all, I would like to congratulate the authors, Mr. Tadjoeddin and Mr. Chowdhury, for the books. Hopefully, it will bring a contribution of our to our beloved country. For the substance of the book, was already mentioned by our distinguished panelists. Actually, I have maybe I have similar question with Mr. Harry, Mr. Pahari. It's about the title. About the title, you use the term post Soeharto. I understand that you want to address the context of the reform, especially the deregulation and decentralization context. But usually the title of the book will be elaborate among all the chapters. So it led to my question: what is the element of post Soeharto that you will explain in the book? Does it provide explanation about maybe business and politics relations in Soeharto and post-Soeharto regime? Example like the patron-client model related that have relevancy to the industrialization. Why not use the term in post-AFC or in deregulation or decentralization era? Is there any special intention or is there something you want to highlight? So that's my question. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bu Ayomi. So apparently the term post Soeharto has attracted attention. In that case, Pak Zulfan is successful, Pak. So all the comments and questions can be addressed by not only the authors but by everybody at the front. So please, who would like to go first?
Let me answer post Soeharto. This is the most important question. Basically, the phrase of post Soeharto is from me. I argue that one because we have to fight about what is the title of the book. So the perspective is like this. When you put the title, you have to be a bit entrepreneurial because we are selling the book. Okay, so you have to attract the customer in the first place. So that's the idea behind that phrase. This is useful now. This proves that what we thought before was correct, right? So why post Soeharto? We can use post crisis or post 2000. 2000 defied the millennium. So Soeharto is more than the crisis, but the crisis is part of Soeharto. So you want to be more inclusive, more coverage, more substance here. Crisis is, okay, crisis involves the mostly economic, currency crisis and then economic crisis, total crisis. But Soeharto is more than that one. And then we want to capture more political change. So if we discuss about recreating the past miracle was the economy based on labor repressions, low wage, and then cheap labor. This is the characteristics of Soeharto economy, politics and economy. So what is the characteristics of politics and economy in Indonesia in post-Soeharto? Different. You can't repress the labor. They have different expectations. And then we are at different level of regional environment. So the regional and international environment where Soeharto steered the country is completely different from the post-reformasi Indonesian leader in steering the Indonesian economy in the context of ASEAN, in the context of Asia. So it has a very philosophical idea to use the title. Now the question is, I remember that last December I visited SMERU with a group of students, and Pa Asep already raised the issue. Why use post Soeharto? So I was thinking now, probably probably this is my questions. I've been out of the country for the past 10 years, so probably I'm not that connect anymore with the current political mode. Probably the comment would be, if you say post Soeharto, you are in danger of being wrong because Soeharto is not over yet. Soeharto may return in different ways. So you are in danger of making wrong claim. So probably that is the reason. I don't know. So this is the answer for this one. Okay, well, the next question, comment, Pak Teguh. Minimum wage compliance. We are arguing that minimum wage compliance will have potential for reducing inequality. We create the scenario, we did calculations. And the effect of 100% minimum wage compliance will reduce inequality, Gini index, around 25 to 30%. That's the potential. Of course, you can't reach 100% minimum wage compliance. And we are not saying that minimum wage will increase productivity. We are not saying that. But what we are saying is productivity will have positive effect on wage. So the most important determinant of wage is productivity. And if you combine, you realign productivity and wage rather than they align. That we saw before that you have productivity like this, and then you have wage stagnant, and then you have declining wage productivity ratio. That could be related to the rise in inequality. So the question now is, if you have realignment, so the movement of productivity is aligned with the movement of wage, and then in the ideal scenario of large, modern, large, medium manufacturing sector, you will have the three things move together. So that's what we call the ideal platform, ideal scenario. Productivity increases, wage increases, the workers happy, and then productivity increases, the employers happy, and then the employment expand, the economy expand, and then everyone is happy. No one left behind, according to UNIDO's language in that sense. And then your second point about the manufacturing modeling that we did, yes, we did disaggregations. We disaggregate the large and medium manufacturing sector into the factor intensity. We have the resource intensity, we have the labor intensive, resource intensive, and capital intensive kind of manufacturing. So we see the different effect of determinants according to the factor intensity. Actually, I can't remember the detailed result now, I'll have to go back to the book what we have written there. So, but we did that one. So, if you are referring to the oil and gas industry, that will be part of the probably resource intensive manufacturing. And going back to the next one, you have export orientation has no significant effect on productivity. And then at the same time, you are talking about the flying Gs. So this is basically to see the changing nature of the Indonesian economy. If you go back to the late 80s, early 90s, the role of foreign direct investment, foreign ownerships in the manufacturing sector, and then the importance of export markets are important. So things has changed in the Indonesian economy. And remember that one of the things that saved the Indonesian economy from the global financial crisis was the less reliance of Indonesian economy to the outside markets. That's one of the reasons. And then the second one was the close alliance with China rather than North America and Western Europe. And then China was strong, and then you align with the strong one, and then you rely on the domestic market. That's two factors that saved Indonesia from the global financial crisis. So in terms of the export orientations, we are dictated by the external environment. So if you have good domestic market, we have good domestic market. So something that can be open. So that's probably my quick response.
Just very quickly, thank you for explaining the issue. Actually, if you look at the Indonesian history, you have three very epoch-making periods. One is the Pak Arno's period. That's the visit after the independence, all the excitement of independence, having a new country, and then going through some crisis, and that crisis led to new order. So you can divide, and then after new order, you can say that democratic. We wanted to have in democratic decentralized Indonesia, but it becomes too big, too long for the title. So that okay. So anyway, coming back to the more substantive question. about the flying gas part, right? No, we are not saying that export is bad or foreign ownership is bad. But we are saying that chasing that only, what has happened in, and uh, we had this issue of say global competitiveness in ranking, basically running behind the foreigners, and that is actually that beauty contest. It has been very distorting. First of all, now the World Bank chief economist, he had to resign because of that. If he openly said that index they do is politically motivated and is distorted. He, being academic, he went there. He found that they were all manipulating the results, and then it caused the election, affect election in Chile. Okay, and then now he made. So this is a very distorting. The second distorting is that it leads to unproductive tax competition. You give incentive to the because the foreigners will come, and you are losing your revenue. And even IMF study, OECD study shows that developing countries are losing huge amount of revenues. We had talked about access to finance through international tax competition. And Mr. Trump has started another one, international tax competition. So these are harmful. And if we look to this index, global index makes no sense because it's a combination of so many factors. You really don't know what is driving this. And but the politicians are very interested in looking at the ranking and just run after it. So this is very, very, we have to be careful. Anyway, coming back that you mentioned about the compliance and a small, this is the big challenge. This is definitely a big challenge, and this is what we said. One of the challenges is how we help them transit from small enterprise to medium to large enterprise. So that graduation, and like we have this debate in the context of microfinance. The microfinance, they are supporting the small enterprises, and they get a structure. So they are in trap. They don't know how to graduate from next stage. So this is a challenge, and here actually access to finance is a very important one. How the credit policy and not to react. That macro policy becomes important. Now every time there is an increase in inflation, inflation can happen for so many different reasons, and we just tighten the credit. So inflation has happened because the commodity price international has gone up. What has that to do with the credit condition in Indonesia? And we are killing our small business. So actually, this is another purpose policy that we have imported from the West. That because this inflation targeting and this and that we have. It sounds nice. It's very nice for the researcher to find the threshold level and estimate the Taylor response function and all these things. But I mean, tell me, what is the source of inflation in Indonesia? Is it the credit? Is it the international fluctuation of commodity prices, or like currency crisis? They inflation went through how many percent? 70%, 80% during the crisis. That got nothing to do with the credit, and we crunch the credit. All the good business also collapsed. So this is the point that is very important, and we really need a specialized policy, a specialized help for the that section, which is the dominating section in the economy. They may not be very productive, very dynamic, but they are the one which they have the largest employment effect. And how we translate them to graduate them to the health that is a big research question.
Thank you. Ibu or the others would like to.
I would like to join the director of the economic department and BAPPENAS about the importance of this the tool that you and also I was impressed of the way that you explain the minimum wage as a tool for policies. However, in Indonesia, even in China, Shanghai, the income level in Shanghai, like any of the highly developed countries, while in some parts of China, still the income level is very, very low. So Indonesia, with the diversity of the income here among the provinces, and the majority are small, when in the missing of intermediate or middle, yeah, missing middles, yes, yeah. So it is very difficult to put a minimum wage on a cross-cutting basis. It should be selective with the specific sectors. Otherwise, you will destroy the immature or the growing some economic sectors like wool industry as other. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Because she said there was discussion on minimum wage. If I'm not mistaken, I think minimum wage in Indonesia is set by province level and also sector level. I think both exist. So I think and then minimum wage. Of course, I'm aware non-compliance with the minimum wages, but I think minimum wage still functions as a key beacon of wage indicator because many enterprises look at minimum wage increase and just wages. So then obviously it's important to look at the inflation and then adjusting minimum wages. Of course, depending on the sector performance, productivity, and then guiding like wage negotiation, industrialization in that way. I think minimum wage in Indonesia, to me, in most countries, it should be like social, sort of like floor kind of idea, so that you don't want because you don't want more people falling below poverty. But in Indonesia, looks like, if I'm not mistaken, my observation is not wrong, it's more like guiding wage negotiation, that function. I think that function, I think, quite important. So then, I mean, non-compliance is one issue, but I think key function we shouldn't forget about, I think.
Um, I have a comment, yeah, from all the discussion so far. I have yet to be convinced on the so-called re-industrialization. So exactly Indonesia, especially for the next LPJMN nih, ya, teman-teman dari BAPPENAS, and also Ministry of Industry, of course, exactly how the strategy, yeah, the strategy to re-industrialize, if this is the path that Indonesia is going to choose, yeah. Because I remember 4 or 5 years ago, when we were preparing the background study, yeah, I challenged my colleagues in BAPPENAS at the time, yeah, exactly the same. Yeah, we are going to emphasize manufacturing sector, industry, and so on and so forth. Yeah, the question is how exactly, and then would be good. Yeah, if there is some assessment and evaluation. The past 4 or 5 years with that strategy, how far have we gone? Do we really succeed or not? Not quite there yet. What are the problem and so on and so forth. As I know, I don't know. Tumbuhan sektor industri berapa? 45%? Barely, ya. Very itu ya, very slow from 5%. It's been hovering 5%. Okay, now it's 5%. But not yet, yeah, not yet as we would like it to be. So there's a lot of details, yeah, that I think the in case the government, yeah, who is in charge, not quite understand maybe, yeah, the right strategy if we want really to reindustrial. I remember 4 or 5 years ago, I challenged, okay, reindustrialization doesn't have to mean only manufacturing sector. Why not apa namanya translate ya industri dalam arti luas, including industri jasa ya dan sebagainya, tourism, and also remember service sector is not only service sector itself, but service sector, some of the service sector are to support other sector. Jadi you have to be maybe, and also the new trend with this digital economy and so on and so forth, industry 4.0, digital economy also in Indonesia so far as I understand utilize the apa namanya opportunity more in terms of logistics and payment. But how then we can also benefit from digital economy and all this new trend for if you want to reindustrialize itself. Kemudian yang global value chain itu I've been participating in various discussion in all this global value chain and the conclusion more or less Indonesia for some reason have not yet benefit from this global value chain, whereas our neighbors already there. Jadi ketinggalan gitu. Okay.
I would like to give the first opportunity to Ibu Winnie. Then the second one is Pak Budi. Is there another one? Ya, Pak Wawan. Okay. Silakan Ibu.
Thank you, Pak Asep, for the opportunity. And first of all, congratulations, Pak Zulfan and Pak Anis for the book launch. This is very interesting. And then I just want to have comment and question on what you are saying regarding to large and medium manufacturing establishment as an ideal platform. Based on our previous research, that when we are focusing on large manufacturing, whereas the large manufacturing is actually more capital intensive, then it will improve quality of the local economy, because as you know that manufacturing is actually more capital intensive rather than labor intensive sector. And then the second one, given the fact that 99% of Indonesian firms is actually small and medium enterprises, when we are focusing on large and medium manufacturing establishments, how could we handle and tackle these SMEs? Pak Anis has mentioned just now that we have to graduate the SMEs, but in reality, it is not easy. And then, after all, when we are now focusing on large and medium manufacturing establishment, won't it be increasing the inequality of the local economies? So that's my first question. And the second one is about digitalization. Do you discuss about how we handle the challenge of digitalization in your book? Thank you.
Yeah. First of all, congratulate Bang Zulfan and Pak Anis for the books. And I think I'm agree with Bu Armida said that I just read the report from ILO and saying that because of automatization and in 2 decades Indonesia will have risk of 56% of workers will lose their job. So it's quite huge, and the sectors is for textile and then clothes and shoes industry, and it's related to industrialization, of course. And then I also read from the World Economic Forum saying that for the students now, the elementary students, they will have jobs that now 65% is not exist now. It's not exist. So it means that we have a disruption. We have a creative destruction that probably what we face for the next like 10, 20 years is really different with current economy. We have the new economy of technology. So I think we should also analyze what is actually the job that probably remain, the skill that probably remain needed, and then what is will be lost, and what is will be probably more relevant, and will be maybe that is new, and the skill is quite new. So I think we should also thinking about that to face for the next uh, the next uh, the next decades, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Budi. Pak Budi is from the SDG Secretariat. We continue with Pak Wawan.
Thank you, Pak Asep. Once again, congratulations Pak Zulfan and Pak Anis for the books. Yeah, my question really actually intrigued by your comment, Pak Anis, in the beginning of your speech, that you say that that firm that cannot afford the minimum wage should just perish, right? But as you know, the setting of the minimum wages in Indonesia, yeah, especially before 2015, is really highly political, right? And that lead up to a significant increase in some provinces and districts in Indonesia. Some provinces even go as high as 40% and some districts 70%. So it is really hurting the business, especially for the firms in the labor incentive industries, right? So their labor cost share is now reaching 25 to 30% of their total cost, which is make it really hard to compete with other industries, right? So, but we also have a huge amount of labor that has low skill. They still need to be employed by this labor-intensive industry. So, how do you think that this could be settled? Yeah, the firms really struggling just to pay the minimum wages. Yeah, just some firms last year in West Java actually would like to have the another set of minimum wages, which is labor intensive minimum wage, that is actually below the current minimum wages. Yeah, because of it. But the constitutional court actually only make it not possible. So that's one thing. Yeah. So what kind of industry that you would like to push in this kind of situations and with this kind of labor supply that we have? Secondly, about this regional minimum wages that you see, it could be a driver for relocation of some businesses, right? Yeah, minimum wages is one thing, but the infrastructure is another thing. So we do have significant differences in minimum wages even in Java, but we didn't see that much of moving toward that area with the low minimum wages. That's in Java. If we compare with other part of Indonesia, it's really hard to see that this industry will move there just due to the minimum wages differences. So I just want your comment on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Wawan. Pak Wawan is from TNP 2K. So,
Let me start with the last question because I remember that. Uh, the issue that you raised is a very important issue, and how you handle minimum wage is a very tricky one because the politics is involved with there. How do you take the politics out from the minimum wage? That is the first issue. And one way you can take politics out of minimum wage is if you have a good social protection system. Because a lot of time now the workers are asking higher minimum wage, more higher severance pay is because they don't have any social safety net. This is what Kaizu said, that social minimum wage in many countries is used as a safety net. So if you have now Indonesia is moving towards having more universal health care and social protection, that is a movement in the right direction. That will hopefully will remove the issue of politics and minimum wage effect. I mean, you need a lot of political skill also by the politician, by the naval leader, by the we cannot dictate possible step that leaders and ministers have to take, but that is an important step. One important step also, you see, minimum wage is not just for the living standard. And if you want to use the minimum wage as a tool for industry policy, then minimum wage should not be based on the performance of each and every enterprises for two reasons. One, it becomes very messy. If every industry has to negotiate its own wage, every enterprise. No, Australia has moved into enterprise level and now they are regretting because every enterprise, it becomes a huge labor issue. Every enterprise, every establishment is now involved in wage negotiation. And that's from the management point of view. But more important, the enterprise which is a low productivity, just a SMERU as an enterprise, is a low productivity and it pays the research at low wage, it will never improve because it can survive. If your low wage, your low productivity will survive. So the wages have to be set across the industry. Like all research institutes should have this minimum wage. Then whoever is falling behind it, it means it's not producing good research. So it has to fall down. So this is the way. This is the neutral policy. You are not picking SMERU versus another one. What is the basic? So that was the advantage of having a wage policy as a neutral one industry policy. That's what we're saying. We're not going into this. Now coming into the issue of digitization and loss of skill, may I suggest one thing? Please stop reading this World Economic Forum reports. They are not written for us. Frankly speaking, McKinsey writes this report. Most of these reports are cut and paste. Frankly speaking, this is now caught. In South Africa, they were caught in, they are paying now a huge amount of penalty because they took money from the government, millions of dollars for producing report, and they were all cut and paste. Okay, so coming back, obviously, if we look, concentrate on Jakarta, Jakarta will move into digital economy, no doubt. But do you think this East Nusantara and those Irian Jaya can move to a digital economy? You lose, no. That's what we are saying. You need industrialization there. You cannot escape. And then, if the digitalization, digital economy, technology is part of the, no. So, if you look at the broad section of the economy, obviously, service sector has a role. It provides services to the main activities. That's what it's called a services sector. So agriculture also supplies to the manufacturing, and manufacturing also there are all interactions between the industry. But some sector has to increase. The issue is, can these provinces which are backward escape the historical sequence we have seen? First agriculture, from manufacturing, then the service sector. Can you really skip that? We are saying you cannot skip that. So, if you want a balanced regional development, balanced Indonesian development, we really have to really focus on those backward states. And how do you do that? Without industrialization. So, we are talking about re-industrialization from that point of view. That's why we said the noble aspect of this book is giving the spatial aspect of that. So, I mean, Armida is not convinced, I know, but let's continue discussion.
Yes, we divide the manufacturing sector into large and medium, and micro and small. Okay, medium will be together with the large one. So actually, we start from the very macro for the whole economy. We look at the relationship between productivity, wage, employment. The three things move together, the ideal platform. We don't find the ideal platform for the overall economy. Then we look at 9 sectors. We don't find the ideal platform. But from the 9 sector, we look at some lights in the manufacturing sector compared to other sectors. And then we look at manufacturing sector. Then we can disaggregate manufacturing sector into two segments, medium large and micro small. And luckily, we have a good data for the medium and large establishment. Long established, good quality surveys, but we don't have good data for the micro small, but we have data. And then we exercise the link between productivity and wage and productivity. So we run for both kind of things, and then we look at a few funny things in the context of micro and small. And so we have to be very cautious about reading the results. But at least the story is good in the context of medium and large. And then after doing that kind of, how can you call it? We start from the big things and we get into 9 sector, and then we look at some lights in the manufacturing sector, we disaggregate manufacturing sector, and then we see the more lights in the context of medium and large, and then we test that one in 2 ways. One is we try to test the ideal platform in the context of 2 digits, no, not 2 digits, 2 digits manufacturing sector. So the large and medium sector can be divided into around 66 subsectors. We run across subsectors, we find the good result, the ideal platform. And then we are convinced with that one, we exploit the firm level data for the medium and large. And then we disaggregate into medium, into large, and then we combine. And then we find the consistent results of the ideal platform. So this is after the long process. And then this is the directions of the lines, which is the medium and large. Now we have to go back to the reality. The reality is the majority of employment in the manufacturing sector are trapped in the informality, in the micro and small. And then, but the contribution is less. And they are part of the informal sector without, of course, if you talk about compliance in the micro small manufacturing establishments, what is the compliance to the minimum wage? They are not part of the minimum wage system. So this is the challenge. But the challenge has to look at for the result of the research where we can see the lights. So we are providing the lights. Whether the reality is different from the lights, that's the policy challenge.
One just final comment I want to make. You see, in the book, what we do, we have a very broad picture. Obviously, and the Ibu Armida asked a very relevant question, and you also asked how we do the policy. That is basically an industry policy, how you design an industry policy. Now, this book is not about industry policy. This book is emphasizing that Indonesia needs industry policy. Previously, we did not have any industry policy. It was you follow international specialization, labor intensive, the flying gauge model, and export orientation, and you just keep your macro environment right, you keep your labor unrest under check, and it develop automatically. That was fine. We are not critical of that. We are saying that has reached its limit. Now you need active industry policy. And we only identified, said in the active industry policy, wages can play a significant role as a policy instrument. There's the importance of access to finance, there's the importance of infrastructure, and a whole gamut of things that comes into industry policy. And the fact that UNIDO is sitting here, perhaps it is the job of the UNIDO in collaboration with the BAPPENAS, with government, to seek the technical assistance there. What kind of industry policy? This is a big question. This is a relevant question. It's not a relevant question, but this book is not about industry policy. We need to never go.
Before to Kazu, how about Ibu Winnie's comment that it's very difficult for micro and small enterprises to graduate into medium and large enterprises? Do you have any response to that?
No, as I said, this part of the industry policy would be to capture them. In old days, maybe we have to revisit that old days. We had a specialized financial sector for them. No, just to look after the small and so that they are not affected by macroeconomic policies. We had a subsidy policy for them, for example. We removed all of this through the liberalization of the economy when we moved into market-based economy. Maybe now some countries are now thinking that we maybe have to revisit the role of the development bank, for example. No, we don't have a development bank now. But no, what the China has done, a lot of countries now trying to look at the China's model of development, how China is helping because China is I don't have the detailed knowledge, but what I hear is that they have not uh, went into complete liberalized economy. So they still have this is why Mr. Trump is worried about saying that you are still subsidizing your companies, you are still undervaluing, and so and WTO is not designed for that because when WTO was designed, they did not anticipate China will join, and so the rules that the WTO set in, they cannot catch China because there is no rule that stop subsidizing the state-owned enterprises or small enterprises. So this is a bigger issue. And so some countries are thinking that whether we should, some African countries now revisiting the old model. I mean, not everything was good about the old model, but we may have thrown the whole thing with the good things as well.
I think discussion is quite interesting. It's endless, but I'd like to be very short. See, well, we need to look at this regional dimension differences in manufacturing and industrialization. But I think we can all agree that the skills demand will quite quickly and rapidly change, and we need to adjust our skills development system to now. And it'd be great if you could foresee future skills needs and plan education, but we cannot. Because new technology comes in, new jobs created, we cannot foresee. Obviously, we cannot. We don't have a crystal ball looking. No, we don't. We cannot know it. What is the coping strategy? Now, we make this skills development system. We have SKK, these are competency standards, they're fair cards and other training providers, SM cards. We need to make them respond faster than before. That is challenge. Let's look at this competency standard and curricula. To what extent they are updated quick enough. That there, I think industry have to play a big role there. They need to be involved in that process. They have to do it faster. And then training equipment, as new job comes in, new training is needed. And can we, the government, say for instance, can the government afford keep buying new equipment and updating training center? It costs a lot. There too, why don't we use this equipment and new technology that the companies already use? Can we send trainees to those companies and let them train? That apprentice model, that's where I think when skills development comes in, and especially when the skills needs not to change, then enterprise have to come in. I think that's one way I think look at it. And micro and middle large in company, that question. Of course, there are two ways of looking at it. Of course, we like to support micro enterprises so that they become more productive, more like bottom-up approach. The other, they were not strong 10 years ago. What did they do? They invested. They heavily invested in industrial policy or financing system, finance that invest in research and development. This mechanism needed. Funding it. That's key for industrial growth of Indonesia. And that, I think, development banks, that's one idea. And if you look at other countries, there are
For lunch, I think, after listening to the Sasando. Thank you all once again, and see you in the next SMERU event. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.